So Knight Frank has actually been on the African continent now for just over 50 years, 53 years. So since 1964, you first opened in Lagos in Nigeria. Since then, you've gone from strength to strength. Judy, if I can start with you, can you tell us a bit more about what Knight Frank means as a brand in Africa, and how do you feel the brand is performing at the moment?
I think as a brand, Knight Frank is considered a trustworthy partner. We are considered a company that has got a lot of expertise in our field. We offer the full array of property solutions across the board. We do valuations, property management and agency, as well as tenant rep. So we are looked at as trusted partners and trusted advisors to a lot of our clients.
Let's talk about your office. You're based obviously in Kampala in Uganda. Yes. Can you tell us a bit more about when you opened, how you're performing, how's everything going?
We opened in 2000, November 2000. And the office has been growing from strength to strength. We started off with 20 employees and there's now 105 of us. So it's been steady growth and steady progress over the last 18 years.
Okay, very good. Yeah. Stephen, you're based in Nairobi. Yes. Tell us more about that.
Knight Frank has been in Nairobi for the last 20 years. Early this year, we celebrated our 20th anniversary. Mm-hmm. And during this period, we have had a phenomenal growth. And we have grown to provide a wide range of services. We are in commercial real estate, that's office, industrial hospitality, we are in residential management, and we are in consultants providing valuation and advisory services.
So we're obviously here for part of the Knight Frank Global Valuations Conference. Tell us more about the strengths that Knight Frank has within valuations within Africa.
Knight Frank is definitely subscribes to the RICS standards, which is really the standards that matter globally when you speak about valuation. And in addition, when you come locally, we also subscribe to the local standard. And therefore, it gives us a competitive edge because we subscribe to international standards and look at the other side. We subscribe and we are compliant locally. And that gives us a competitive edge because we are able, to satisfy a client who is looking at both, which many of our competitors are not able to meet.
And what are some of the challenges that a property owner might face should they not adhere to those values and to those standards?
Definitely, if you do not want to subscribe to the kind of standards that Knight Frank subscribes to, and basically the RICS Red Book and even our local standards, what will happen to you is that you are likely to be exposed on matters risk. Your due diligence will be wrong. The numbers will be correct, will be incorrect. And at the end of the day, really, it meets the purpose of consultation. And therefore, we pride ourselves as people who can provide something that many of our competitors are not able to provide. And therefore, we have assisted our clients manage their risk and remain afloat business-wise and make the right investment decisions.
So Peter, obviously you've worked extensively throughout Africa. If you look at the continent as a whole, it's taken leaps and bounds forward in the last couple of decades. I'm always a bit nervous about trying to describe Africa as a continent just because there are so many economies within it. If you are, though, to answer, what are the macro driving forces behind property development in Africa as a continent, is question one, and then secondly, which are the economies that you would look out for right now and that you believe have a very positive future ahead of them?
A really, really interesting question, Will. Thank you. If you look at any of those countries, number one has got to be political stability. Number two has got to be currency stability. And number three has got to be demand from independent users of space, and be they office users, be they retail users, or be they residential users. If you were to highlight one particular country, I would definitely go as number one be Kenya, Nairobi. Nairobi is no doubt the capital of East Africa. And if you look at where South Africa sits on the continent, you've got Nairobi representing the last capital before you actually arrive in Europe, particularly as a result of the machinations that have happened along the North African coastline, particularly with Cairo. So number one country has got to be Kenya. And of course, linked to Kenya, you have Uganda, and Judy rightly said, if you look at the sort of growth that's happened in Uganda over the years since Judy set up the business, that's all been linked into the East African economy. So very important to look at East Africa. But then you just have to go slightly north to Ethiopia. Ethiopia has some of the highest growth rates predicted over the next 3 years. It's got a very pro-Western government, and in terms of opportunity, based upon the new rail link that the Chinese have built from the port, and actually you could say Ethiopia is landlocked, and my response to that is no, it isn't, because Djibouti is actually effectively the port to Ethiopia. Now you've got the Chinese railway. That means that the capital is linked to a port. Tremendous opportunities, and we know both Asian and Middle Eastern capital have been looking at those opportunities in Ethiopia, having established themselves in Nairobi.
And you've mentioned very clearly the example of the railroad being built by the Chinese. In many cases, a lot of these projects are either PPPs, huge amounts of inflows coming in from Asia, the Middle East, Europe, the United States. Do you see that continuing?
I do, and actually, Stephen, you'll know, Stephen and I worked on a project recently where we looked at the road systems in Nairobi, for example, and we looked at the growth in land values on the 4 key roads that have been built that surround the capital. And you've got a variation between 5 and 10 times increase in value over the last 6 to 8 years. Why is that? It's infrastructure. And that infrastructure investment is accelerating. And that acceleration is going to mean Nairobi is going to be even more important on the back of Uganda's growth within their own economy. Yes. Really important.
And of course, President Kenyatta's recent trip to the United States and potentially securing a contract, I understand, with Bechtel to join Mombasa to Nairobi. This sort of infrastructure will lead to even further growth, particularly within logistics, but also reaching some of the landlocked countries. Can you tell us a bit more about those and how that's going to work? Stephen, if I can pass that to you.
Yeah, that road definitely is going to foster the position of Nairobi as a logistics center and as a communication hub, if you look at it in a broad perspective, in the sense that in addition to the SGR that now joins Nairobi, Mombasa, and the phase 2 to Naivasha, and definitely finally to Kisumu. The road is going to give more connectivity and a lot of a capital injection into the economy throughout the phase of this infrastructure project. And what is going to have the impact that this project is going to have on properties that because of the increased connectivity and already our locational advantages, this is going to open up more areas for new real estate development projects. And we have already begun to see that. As we speak, Kenya Railways is negotiating with one of our local parastatals to set up a new expanded inland container depot outside the capital, and it is positioned in such a way that it is going to be served by the SGR as well as the proposed road. Yeah.
Very good. Judy, can I just ask you about commercial valuations within Uganda? What's been the trend of that recently? I mean, obviously Kampala has become more of an international destination in very recent years. What do you think the effect has been on that? And is there more of a structure now to commercial valuation in country?
Yes, I think commercial valuations have matured and they've grown off the back of more sophisticated investor requirements coming into the market, obviously, but also the build quality of the commercial properties that we're seeing now is really improving. Yep. And they're building more to international standards and providing very good space. We're getting some good covenants coming in. Also off the back of the oil, ever since we discovered the oil, we're getting some very good covenants coming in, signing long leases. So it's affected our commercial valuations positively, and the market on the whole as well. Okay.
If I can just ask each of you just to quickly describe, what do you think the most powerful asset Knight Frank has within Africa? What's its ace in the hole? What makes it competitive against the competition? Peter, if I can start with you.
In the property industry, we refer to location, location, and location. With Knight Frank around the world, and particularly in Africa, we are known as trust, trust, and trusted. And actually, without any shadow of a doubt, if anybody is going to go into any emerging market, and I would suggest that we can categorize all 54 countries in Africa as at various stages in the emerging market rolling, that trust and local partners are absolutely 1, 2, and 3.
Good. Judy?
I think following on to what Peter said, if you look at all the African offices, there's very strong competence and expertise within the local office heads. So what we're doing is we're working, it's a local office but working to international standards, and the clients are confident that we're offering them a foolproof, good, informed and trusted advice across the board. Yeah.
Very good. Stephen, last word?
Yeah, despite the challenges that investors in Africa face, Knight Frank in Africa has invested heavily in market research and intelligence. And we have an unrivaled database and analytical tools which cannot be rivaled by anybody. And therefore, when you're coming to Africa and you're looking at investing in real estate, you cannot get the quality on matters, advisory services, and in-depth understanding of this market than you can get in Knight Frank.
Very good.
Yeah.
That's all the time we have for today. So I'd like to thank our panelists very much for joining us, and thank you very much for watching.
Thank you.
Thank you, Will.
Thank you.